A white horse gallops across the ocean waves, defying all natural law. On its back, two lovers ride westward, a warrior poet and a woman with golden hair whose beauty makes the very sun seem dim. Behind them, the green hills of Ireland fade into mist. Ahead lies Thír, the land of eternal youth, where time moves like honey, where sorrow is unknown, where 3 years feel like 3 centuries. Or is it the other way around? The man believes he's leaving for a brief visit to paradise. He doesn't yet know the price. He can't imagine that when he returns, everyone he loves will be dust, his father's great hall will be ruins, and strangers will pray to a new god in an unrecognizable land. He doesn't know that a single moment of carelessness, 1 foot touching Irish soil, will collapse 300 years onto his shoulders in a single devastating instant. But where did this story come from? Welcome to the Beat Nomads, History and Myths Awakened podcast. I'm your host, and today we're exploring one of Ireland's most beloved legends, the tale of Oisín and Niamh and their doomed journey to Thír, the land of eternal youth. This is a story about love that transcends worlds, about time that betrays memory, and about the impossible choice between paradise and home. Over the next half hour, we'll trace this legend from its earliest documented sources in medieval Ireland through its transformation into the romantic tale we know today. We'll explore how the story changed across centuries and cultures, what it meant to the people who told it, and why this ancient myth of a man who left home and found he could never truly return still resonates in our modern world of displacement and longing. The question we're asking is this: what does this legend reveal about how cultures process loss, change, and the price of transcendence? To understand the legend of Oisín and Niamh, we need to meet Oisín himself. And the answer to that question takes us to a 12th century scriptorium in Ireland, where monks were copying ancient stories onto vellum pages. The Book of Leinster, a massive medieval manuscript compiled around 1160 and now held at Trinity College, Dublin, contains one of the earliest surviving written mentions of Oisín. According to historian research into early Irish manuscripts, Oisín appears there in a poem where he's identified simply as a poet, with no further details about his identity or exploits. The manuscript was compiled by Ard Ua Crimtain, abbot of Terryglass in County Tipperary, who wrote proudly on one page, Ard Ua Crimtain wrote this book and collected it from many books. The Book of Leinster is an anthology, a greatest hits collection of Irish sagas, genealogy, medical knowledge, and place name lore, preserving material that dates from the 8th to the 12th centuries. But the Oisín we're searching for, the one who journeyed to another world and returned centuries later, doesn't fully emerge until another text, the Acallam na Senórach, usually translated as the Colloquy of the Ancients or Tales of the Elders of Ireland, composed around 1200. This remarkable work survives in later medieval and early modern manuscripts, and scholars generally date its composition to the late 12th or early 13th century. The Acallam opens with one of the most haunting encounters in Irish tradition: Oisín and his fellow survivor, Caoilte Macronain, remnants of the Fianna after the Battle of Gabra, entering the world of St. Patrick. The text does not linger over how the two men found each other again. Instead, it presents them already together as living bridges between two ages, warriors of the old heroic Ireland, now standing in a Christian one. Patrick is wary of the pagan world they carry with them, but the story says angels appear to him and instruct him to listen and have their words preserved. So Patrick sets scribes to the task, and Oisín and Caoilte begin to unfold the lost world of the Fianna, the hunts, the battles, the loves, the landscapes, and the uncanny journeys into the other world. This is brilliant cultural work. The Christian scribes found a way to preserve pagan mythology by framing it as testimony given to Ireland's patron saint. The stories could survive because they were being documented by holy men, not celebrated by heathens. But here's what's crucial. Scholars have noted that the story of Oisín's disappearance to an otherworldly woman's fairyland is regarded as one of several tales invented to explain why Oisín wasn't killed at Gabra with the rest of the Fianna, and how he managed to live long enough to tell his stories to St. Patrick centuries later. The legend served a narrative function. It was a plot device to make the frame story work. And this is where the tradition becomes complicated. The medieval Acallam na Senórach gives us Oisín alive in St. Patrick's world, but it does not yet offer the later and more familiar explanation that he passed 300 years in Thír na Nog with Niamh. In the older tradition, Niamh is not an otherworldly bride, but a mortal princess, daughter of Angus Thír of Munster, who flees with Oisín to Ulster. Their happiness lasts only 6 weeks before her father comes after them with an army, and Niamh, rather than be captured, kills herself by burying her face in the earth alongside 30 women. The place is remembered as the Well of the Women by the Lake of the Red Stag. It's a tragic love story, yes, but it has nothing to do with Thír na Nog, magical horses, or time slipping sideways. So where did that version come from? The romantic tale of Oisín and Niamh riding across the sea to the land of eternal youth, the version that has captured imaginations for centuries, comes from a single source, a poem composed around 1750 and attributed to Michael Coiman, also known as Michael Common, who lived from around 1680 to 1760. The poem is called Laoi Oisín ar Thír na Nog, which translates as the Lay of Oisín in the Land of Youth. According to scholarly consensus, this is the only Irish text preserved from the past, which contains the story of Oisín and Niamh in Thír na Nog. Let me repeat that. Before mid-18th century, we have no surviving written record of this particular story. Michael Coiman was a native of County Clare, born near Milltown Malbay. He was one of the better-educated Irish poets of Munster in the middle of the 18th century. He wrote in the Irish language. This was not an ancient poem, but contemporary verse in the spoken language of his time. For more than 100 years after Coiman composed it, the poem existed only in manuscript form. Copies were passed from hand to hand, and through this circulation and oral transmission, the story gradually spread to the neighboring counties of Kerry, Galway, and Mayo, the western counties of Ireland, and even to the west of Scotland. Here's where it gets interesting. Scholars writing about the poem's origins have noted that it may have been based on lost traditional material. But, and this is crucial, the opposite may be true. Coiman may have largely invented the story, working from very basic hints about Oisín and Cailte's journeys to fairy mounds, as mentioned in the Acallam na Senórach. It has even been suggested that the folktale Coiman borrowed from may not necessarily be Irish, since foreign tales of the same theme are numerous and widespread. What theme are we talking about? The time slip motif. A hero travels to a magical realm. Time passes differently there, and when he returns, centuries have elapsed in the mortal world. This narrative pattern appears across cultures and continents. In Japan, the tale of Urashima Taro dates to at least 713 CE, when it was recorded in the Tango Fudoki, an ancient regional chronicle. A fisherman rescues a turtle, is taken to an undersea palace, spends what feels like 3 days with a princess, returns home to find 300 years have passed, opens a forbidden box, and ages instantly. In Washington Irving's 1819 story Rip Van Winkle, itself loosely based on European folklore, a man falls asleep in the mountains and wakes to find that decades have passed and the world has changed around him. These stories share structural DNA, the journey to another world, the distortion of time, the return to a changed homeland, the catastrophic aging or loss. So, did Michael Coiman invent the romantic Oisín and Niamh story, or adapt it from older oral tradition that simply wasn't written down? We don't know. What we do know is that before his poem, the written record is silent on this particular tale. So, this is a myth correction. The story many people assume is an ancient, authentic Irish legend preserved from time immemorial is actually a relatively recent literary creation, or at best, an 18th century adaptation of oral material that left no earlier trace. Let's turn now to the story itself as Michael Coiman told it, drawing directly from his 1750 poem and the translations that followed. The tale begins with Fionn mac Cumhail and the Fianna, a legendary warrior band, hunting deer near Loch Line, known today as the Lakes of Killarney in County Kerry. Oisín, Fionn's son, was with them. His name means young deer or fawn, and according to older legends, he was regarded as the greatest poet of Ireland. He was both warrior and bard, a man who could fight and sing with equal skill. As they hunted, a vision appeared. A woman of extraordinary beauty came riding toward them from the west, across the ocean waves, mounted on a white horse. Her hair gleamed like gold in the sunlight. According to Coimon's poem, when she reached the Fianna, she announced herself, "I am Niamh, the golden-headed, daughter of the king of the land of youth." She declared that she had heard of Oisín's fame and had fallen in love with him. She intended to take him to her homeland, Thír, the land of the young, and she described the promises it held: eternal youth, beauty, abundance, joy, freedom from sorrow and death. Oisín, already enchanted, consented. He mounted the white horse behind Niamh, and together they rode across the sea. But this is where Coimon's version includes a curious episode that's often left out of modern retellings. As they journeyed, Oisín and Niamh witnessed a maiden from another otherworld, the land of the living, being violently pursued by a giant called Fomor Biliash of Drumlachach. Oisín couldn't ignore a woman in distress. They made a detour to a place called the Land of Virtues, where Oisín championed the maiden and killed the giant. Only then did they continue to Thír. When they arrived, they met Niamh's parents, the king and queen, and were married. The couple had 3 children, 2 sons they named Oscar and Finn, after Oisín's own son and father, and a daughter called Plorna, which means flower of women. Time in Thír moved differently than in the mortal world. According to the poem, Oisín lived there for more than 300 years, but to him it felt like only 3. Now, what was Thír? The name literally translates as land of the young or land of youth. In Irish mythology, it's described as an island paradise, a supernatural realm of everlasting youth, beauty, health, abundance, and joy. Time there is non-linear. Inhabitants never age. It's one of several names for the Irish Otherworld. Other names include Thír Tearngair, land of promise, Meg Mel, plain of delight, and Thír Fothuin, land under the wave. The Otherworld was thought to be inhabited by the Tuatha De Danann, the gods of pre-Christian Ireland. These were the divine beings who, according to myth, once ruled Ireland, but were defeated by the Milesians, the ancestors of the modern Irish. After their defeat, the Tuatha De Danann retreated into the side, the fairy mounds and hills scattered across the Irish landscape. They became invisible, dwelling in a parallel realm that coexisted with the mortal world but remained just beyond reach. The ancient Irish believed the otherworld wasn't far away. It was accessible through certain places, burial mounds, lakes, caves, and at certain times. The festivals of Samhain and Beltane, which marked the transitions between the light and dark halves of the year, were considered liminal times when the boundary between worlds grew thin and contact with the otherworld became possible. This was the realm Oisín entered when he rode west with Niamh. After what felt like 3 years, but was actually 3 centuries, Oisín began to feel something he'd never experienced in Thír, homesickness. He longed to see his father Fionn and his comrades of the Fianna. He wanted to walk the hills of Ireland again, to hear his native tongue, to see familiar faces. Niamh understood but feared the worst. She reluctantly agreed to let him visit Ireland, giving him her white horse, Embar, for the journey. But she imposed a strict condition: he must not dismount. If his feet touched Irish soil, he would never be able to return to her. The magic of Thír would leave him. She warned him that his journey would be for nothing. The Fianna were long gone from Ireland, she said. Christians now inhabited the land. Everything he remembered had vanished. Oisín rode back across the sea. When he reached Ireland, he was devastated by what he found. Niamh had told him the truth. His father's great hall on the hill of Almu stood in ruins. The Fianna were nowhere to be found. The people he encountered seemed smaller, weaker, or perhaps it was simply that he, sustained by otherworldly magic, remained a man of the ancient, heroic age. Desperate to find some trace of his old life, Oisín rode through the countryside. At a place called Glyn and Smoil, the Glen of the Thrushes, he came upon a group of men struggling to lift a heavy marble flagstone. In some versions, they were trying to move it onto a wagon. In others, they were simply trying to shift it out of their way. To Oisín, the stone seemed trivial. He had the strength of a hero from the age of the Fianna. He leaned down from his horse to help them lift it. And that's when disaster struck. As he strained to move the stone, the horse's girth, the strap holding the saddle, broke. Oisín fell from the horse and hit the ground. The moment his body touched Irish soil, 300 years collapsed onto him at once. His hair turned white, his skin withered, his muscles atrophied, his eyes clouded. In an instant, he became a feeble, blind old man. The white horse, freed from its burden and its duty, galloped away, back toward the sea, back toward Thír, where Oisín could never follow. According to Coimon's poem, the story is told within the frame of Oisín's dialogue with St. Patrick. In some versions, Oisín lives just long enough to tell Patrick the stories of the Fianna before he dies. In others, the two men debate theology, Oisín defending the old, heroic pagan values, Patrick preaching Christian salvation. The conversations between them became a literary tradition in their own right, representing the collision of two worlds, the pre-Christian Irish past, with its emphasis on martial valor and bardic memory, and the Christian present, with its promise of eternal life through faith rather than deeds. So what did this story mean to the people who told it? And what does it reveal about human experience that keeps it resonant today? First, let's address the cultural function the legend served in medieval Ireland. As scholars have noted, the story of Oisín's otherworld sojourn was one of several tales invented to explain a narrative problem. How could Oisín survive the Battle of Gabra, where the entire Fianna was annihilated, and live long enough to meet St. Patrick centuries later? The time slip in Thír solved this problem elegantly. Oisín didn't age because he wasn't in the mortal world. He became a witness to both eras, a bridge between the pagan heroic age and the Christian present. This narrative strategy allowed Christian scribes to preserve pagan mythology. Oisín could tell Patrick, and through Patrick, the scribes and readers, the old stories without endorsing the old religion. The legends were being documented as historical testimony, not celebrated as living belief. But the story operates on deeper psychological and spiritual levels as well. At its heart, the legend is about displacement and the impossibility of return. Oisín leaves home expecting a brief adventure. He returns to find that everyone and everything he loved has vanished. The world has moved on without him. He's become a relic, a ghost in his own land. This is the experience of exile, of refugees, of immigrants who return after decades to find their homeland transformed. It's also the experience of anyone who has ever felt the disorientation of time passing, the shock of realizing that what felt like yesterday was actually years ago, that the people and places we carry in memory no longer exist. The Irish, as a people, have particular historical reasons to resonate with this theme. Centuries of colonization, famine, and mass emigration created a diaspora that spans the globe. Millions of Irish people left their homeland, and many never returned. Those who did often found the Ireland they remembered had changed beyond recognition. The legend of Oisín speaks to that experience of irreversible separation. There's also a meditation on the price of transcendence. Thír offers everything humans desire: eternal youth, beauty, joy, freedom from suffering. But accepting that gift means severing ties with the mortal world. Oisín can't have both. The moment he tries to reconnect with his old life, the moment his foot touches Irish soil, he loses everything. The legend asks, what would you give up for paradise? And is paradise still paradise if it means abandoning everyone and everything you love? Time itself becomes a character in the story, not the steady, linear progression we imagine, but something fluid and treacherous. In Thír, time moves like a dream. 300 years pass in what feels like 3. But mortal time is relentless. It doesn't stop for anyone, and it can't be reversed. The legend captures the human experience of time's elasticity, how a single moment can feel like an eternity or a lifetime can slip away in a blink. Celtic cultures viewed time as cyclical rather than linear. The agricultural year turned in a wheel, planting and harvest, light and dark, Beltane and Samhain. The other world existed outside this cycle, but humans inhabit time. We age and die. The tragedy of Oisín is that he tried to step outside time and then step back in. You can't do both. The legend of Oisín and Niamh didn't remain static. It traveled, adapted, and inspired new works across centuries and continents. In the mid-18th century, a Scottish poet named James Macpherson published a series of poems he claimed to have translated from ancient Scottish Gaelic manuscripts. The narrator of these poems was Oisín, Macpherson's version of Oisín. The poems became a sensation across Europe, influencing Goethe, the young Walter Scott, and the Romantic movement. But their authenticity was hotly disputed. Irish scholars accused Macpherson of literary theft, of usurping the Fenian cycle from Gaelic Ireland for commercial gain. Modern scholarship has shown that Macpherson did base his poems on authentic Gaelic ballads, but he adapted them heavily, altering characters and ideas to suit contemporary 18th century sensibilities. The controversy refuses to die. Well into the 21st century, scholarly articles have continued to debate the Oisín question. In 1889, the Irish poet William Butler Yeats published his first major success, The Wanderings of Oisín, an epic poem that reimagined the legend. Oscar Wilde, reviewing it, praised its nobility of treatment and nobility of subject matter, delicacy of poetic instinct, and richness of imaginative resource. Yeats drew on Michael Coyman's lay for the opening of his poem, and on the ancient dialogues of Oisín and Patrick for the closing. But the pages dealing with the three islands Oisín visits were, in Yeats's own words, wholly my own, having no further root in tradition than the Irish peasant's notion that Thír na Nog is made up of three phantom islands. Yeats's poem dramatizes temporal dislocation and cultural rupture. His Oisín returns from immortal isles to a changed Ireland, where pagan heroism collides with Christian authority. The poem registers nostalgia, the cost of memory, and the melancholy of aging and exile. It became a defining work of the Irish literary revival, a movement that sought to reclaim Irish mythology and language in the face of British colonial dominance. Today, the story continues to resonate. It appears in novels, films, songs, and scholarly studies. It's invoked as a metaphor for emigration, for cultural loss, for the experience of returning to a homeland that no longer exists except in memory. And here's what's remarkable. Even though we now know that the Romantic version of the story is relatively recent, that it may have been largely invented or adapted by an 18th century poet from non-Irish sources, it has become authentically Irish through the act of telling and retelling. Legends don't require ancient pedigrees to be meaningful. They require resonance. The story of Oisín and Niamh resonates because it captures something true about human experience. The longing for a place beyond time, the impossibility of return, and the devastating weight of years catching up with us all at once. So what have we learned? The legend of Oisín and Niamh is not an ancient Irish myth preserved from time immemorial. The familiar version, the romantic tale of the warrior poet who rode across the sea to Thír na Nog with Niamh of the golden hair, comes from a single surviving poem composed around the mid-18th century and traditionally attributed to Michael Coyman. The Romantic version may have been adapted from older oral traditions, or it may have been largely invented by Coyman, borrowing from the widespread time-slip motif found in folklore across cultures, from Japan to America to Ireland. But regardless of its origins, the legend has become deeply meaningful. It speaks to the experience of displacement and exile, to the impossibility of return, and to the price of transcendence. It captures the human relationship with time, how it moves differently in memory than in reality, how a moment can last forever, and how a lifetime can vanish in an instant. The story has adapted and evolved, inspiring poets like Yeats, sparking international literary controversies, and continuing to resonate in our modern world of displacement, migration, and longing. And it reminds us that legends don't have to be ancient to be true. They just have to tell us something about ourselves that we recognize across centuries and cultures as real. You've listened to Beat Nomads, History and Myths Awakened. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. Your support helps us continue exploring the legends and myths that shape our understanding of the world. Next time, we'll explore another story. This time, we'll tell about the Salmon of Wisdom and how Finn McCool accidentally got all the knowledge of the world. Until then, remember, some journeys change you so completely that you can never truly come home again.